All right, for those of you who missed our introduction, and for those of you who are looking forward to learning more about Mary Magdalene, or what other people think of Mary Magdalene, since we don't know that much about her, I'm sorry. I'm not doing it. um, you got to follow the times, right? So when Andy and I were talking earlier this week, I was like, so I'd have to figure out, do a bunch more research to get to the place where we were ready to preach on that this week. And the sermon that was in my head and heart and soul for this week had to do with looking at Jesus and nonviolent resistance. And so that's what we decided to go with. And I don't know what we'll decide to go with next week. But what I said earlier is that what I'm going to do is send out some of the places I'd be working from for your own research if you are care about the Mary Magdalene thing and are a little bit nerdy in that kind of a way. Everybody's a little nerdy in some way, right? But if you're nerdy in the same way that I am, then I'll plan for a theology pub at some point so that we could talk about that. And this is the season of Epiphany, the season of lights. And geez, today we're going to talk about Jesus and nonviolent resistance, because that's where we are. Nonviolent resistance did not begin with Jesus. You can find examples of clever ways of resisting violence back in the Hebrew scriptures as well. Jesus has this one chapter that you just heard that has become part of the teaching for nonviolence resistors since then. And so that's one of the things that we are going to look at. So it's been studied by Gandhi and MLK and everybody who studies those schools of thought on these things. And so lots of things have changed in the world because of nonviolent resistance. And we are adding ourselves to that list. This will be a hope-filled sermon. So your tears will only be the verklempt kind because of how much hope you have, not because of how sad you are this week, okay? That's my, well, at least from my, what I will say to you, from whatever's going on in your life, that's for another time. But if you have tears about that, that's different. Today's text comes from Matthew. It's part of the Sermon on the Mount. You heard me say maybe a couple months ago, but it might have only been a month because time is a little funny right now. I talked about how the Sermon on the Mount is that time when Jesus was trying to get away and then 5,000 people showed up, not including women and children. Do you remember me talking about this? And that what they were signifying to us when they said not including women and children is that these 5,000 men are the size of a Roman battalion. So it was an army that showed up to listen to Jesus talk. And Jesus says lots of things to this army that was gathered. This is where it begins with, "Blessed are the peacemakers," which is actually the text assigned for this Sunday. We're just going a little later, in the same chapter as every other church, but just a little bit later on. "Blessed are the peacemakers, and blessed are the poor in spirit, and blessed are those who mourn." And we'd have a way into the text that text today too, but we're just gonna do this next part instead. And Jesus then goes into this part where he's talking about this turning the other cheek and walking the extra mile and praying for those who persecute you. And that's the part we're going to talk about. And that's the part that made me, on that day, I don't think I mentioned this, I said that text and learning that was part of what made me decide to become a pastor. It was because I was in my office at Concordia College doing some work. I was preaching in the summertime for churches, but I wasn't a pastor yet. Didn't want to be a pastor. And I'd had this neighbor talk to me about Bonhoeffer, and that was a moment that was important to me. And then I had this other person who'd said to me that the right reason to go to seminary might be if you like the kind of work that you're doing right now and you think it'd be fun to study theology for 3 or 4 years. And I was like, why would anyone want to do that? And then I was at my computer reading about this, about the 5,000 and this army that showed up, and how Jesus preached about nonviolent resistance and peace to them. And the computer got blurry, and I had to shut that window or whatever it was back then very quickly, because it was just freaking me out that it was that exciting to learn about theology. So, not too much longer after that, I ended up in seminary. Those words that we hear about, the turning the other cheek and walking the extra mile and praying for those who persecute you, and the call to be nonviolent, get interpreted in some very dangerous ways in our world. For years, we have heard stories of especially women coming and saying that they went to their pastor or their priest with stories about the abuse that they were suffering at home, and were told to turn the other cheek. And that had meant to stay with your abuser and keep on getting abused. This is not Christ's message. So there's this man named Walter Wink. Oh, I brought this book along too. It's kind of fun for me to bring my work along, show my work. His name is Walter Wink, and he wrote this book called The Powers That Be that did some really great research on these texts. There are other ancient texts from these days that tell us more about the context that the biblical writers were writing in, that helps us to understand them a little bit better. And that's some of what Walter Wink has done. Talking about Jesus' third way, that Jesus didn't teach people to be passive and accept abuse, and he didn't teach that you should fight back, but instead that there is this third way, which is to refuse to oppose this evil on its own terms, but to reset the terms. The third way is assertive, yet nonviolent. So let's begin with some cultural context. In this world, everyone was right-handed. I mean, not everybody was right-handed, but everyone used their right hand for everything, because that was what, well, you all know, it was what was culturally acceptable for lots and lots of years. You only used your left hand for one thing: wiping. No toilet paper. To even gesture with that hand meant to be excluded from meeting and penance for 10 days in that time. So when you hear about being hit, you might imagine someone throwing a punch. But if they did that, and if they threw that punch and it landed on your right cheek, well, I just need a demonstrator up here. So is someone willing to come? Thank you. Catherine, I won't hit you very hard. Okay, so it's saying, if someone strikes you on your right cheek, offer your other as well, right? This is Catherine's right cheek, right? I'm bad at these, so that means what he is saying is that this person is not being hit with a fist, because if the person was using their right hand, which is how they would hit with a fist, it would hit their left cheek, right? But Jesus says if he hits you on your right cheek, and so we're talking about a backhand, and then is saying offer your other cheek as well. And that means that either the person, it's flipping the script, because it's saying either the person is going to, first you responded in a different way. What they did didn't work. So you responded in a way that is surprising them, and now they have to think about what to do. Are they going to take themselves out of society for 10 days and humiliate themselves by using this left hand? Are they going to hit you? And this is the other thing, like this backhanded slap is how you hit people who are subservient to you. So the people that Jesus is preaching to are obviously often subservient to someone, Roman soldiers being the biggest thing that he's talking about in this case. And so this group of 5,000 men who showed up are being told, like, we know you get hit this way. We know you're subservient to someone. Do this instead. So now, am I going to hit you like you're an equal and then therefore assert your power? Or am I going to humiliate myself with my left hand? Or am I going to, try to do this? The person has to make a choice. Thanks. So that's a little different, isn't it? Than just live with your abuse. lots of paragraphs later. That part about responding in an unexpected way than what people expect from the violence that they assert is part of what is the key to nonviolent resistance, an act of defiance that renders that master, the one in charge, incapable of asserting his dominance in the relationship. Okay. So, so when this might not actually be super good advice for, say, a person who's trapped in an abusive relationship, but Jesus isn't talking to one person when he says this. He's talking to 5,000 men, right? So if that large crowd comes together and finds a way to make the oppressors have to stop and consider other options and confuses the fact that people are not following the script, then you have a revolution on your hands and the resistance has begun. Similarly, this business about giving away your shirt, do you remember that part? It says, so I'm going to do this again. I'm going to go off my script and then I'm going to have to find my place in it again. But at least it's easier to listen to me when I do this, right, Dave? Mm-hmm. So, court back in this time. You could be sued for all kinds of things and have a lot of things taken away. And then if you were particularly poor, and usually this happened because of Roman taxation, we've talked before about the fishers, for instance, who were a lot of people who followed Jesus. Well, I don't know about a lot, but at least two. The land that they were farming was overtaxed, so they were always in debt. So if you got taken to debtor's court, then they would take things from you until you didn't have anything left. And back then, they're wearing two garments, an inner garment and an outer garment. And they could then, if they took you to court, they would sue you for your cloak, the outer garment, and then you would walk around in your underwear all day long. Everyone would know you'd been sued. Everyone would know you're absolutely, completely broke. And that's like the humiliation that goes along with that system. So now what it's saying, offer your shirt as well. If someone takes your cloak, offer your shirt as well. So it's saying, just go ahead and, the rule was you had to, by the way, get the cloak back by the end of the day, by nightfall, because that is how you stay warm at night. And so instead, just strip in court and then see what happens, because then you're standing there naked in front of everybody. And it turns out that, I don't know, when Walter Wink talks about that, he says the nakedness is really shameful in this culture at this time, and the shame is not on the person who's naked, but on the people who view it. And so it would be putting to shame everybody who was in the court. I kind of feel like it's not so dissimilar now. Like, how often have you accidentally walked into someone using the bathroom, and how embarrassing it is, like, for you who did that as well as the person who's using the bathroom. So maybe even worse, I don't know. Am I the only one that feels that way? Oh, good. So that's our second example. And then there's one more example. Let's see how many pages I went through now. I probably said interesting things in here. Imagine the scene then of rich creditors in court with someone who lost everything but the clothes on his back. And I'll refrain from demonstrating this part. And the response of the man is, fine then, take my clothes. Okay, so the third example has to do with walking the extra mile. And what the text tells us is, if someone asks you to walk 1 mile, walk another as well, I think is the direct quote. And this has to do with a very strange Roman rule that this armies would be walking through the land like, peacekeepers. And if they walked by you on their marches through the land, they had the right to ask you to carry their packs, but only for 1 mile. And so, if you just kept on walking with their pack beyond that, then you're forcing the soldier to break the law, not you. And so, it's another example then of he's got someone that's above him who's going to be calling him out on this law or someone will, and you are forcing a different decision. Again, a different response than what is expected. I hope you can see that these 3 lessons have nothing to do with being passive or accepting abuse. It's trying to turn the system upside down. Yes, love without expecting anything in return. And yes, give to others without expecting anything in return. And yes, do good to even those who hate you. Yes, pray for all people, even regardless of how you feel about them or what they have done to you. But do not stay the subject of abuse. That is not Jesus, and it's not good news. And Jesus is about good news. So whoever has said that before is wrong. And I'd bet my life on it. So Jesus' 3rd way, and all non-resistance teachers since then teach methods that talk about seizing the moral initiative, finding a creative alternative to nonviolence, asserting your own humanity and dignity as a person, meeting force with ridicule or humor, breaking the cycle of humiliation, taking the shirt off, refusing to submit or accept the inferior position, the slap on the cheek, exposing the injustice of the system, taking control of the power dynamic, shaming the oppressor into repentance, one would hope, standing your ground, forcing the powers into decisions for which they are not prepared, recognizing your own power, being willing to suffer rather than retaliate, force the oppressors to see you in a new light. Both of these things, the last 2, being willing to suffer rather than retaliate and forcing the oppressors to see you in a new light, happen with Jesus on the cross. When you see the soldiers say, truly this man was the Son of God. Deprive the oppressor of a situation where force is effective, and be willing to undergo the penalty of breaking unjust laws. I don't know about you, but I am not going to get a gun. I hate them, and besides, they don't work. As our poem in the beginning mentioned, I can promise you that the ones oppressing, which in this case is the federal government, just who knew this would happen? It's such a strange time. They will always have bigger, better, faster, more guns, and they will always know how to use them better, and they will always be more quick to jump to that than I think any of us would. Now, if I were in a different kind of church than this one, that might not be true. But I won't ever be in that kind of church. But then we'd be talking about a bloodbath where no one wins, and certainly there's nothing moral about that way. So that is not the way of freedom here. Jesus' 3rd way of nonviolent resistance is the best tool we have, and it turns out the most effective in history, and it works. I don't know when it will work here. It's going to work in little ways, but the country and the world is watching us do it and cheering us on and saying that they are learning from us. And here's a short list of some examples. Debbie, can I see? You already knew this was coming. School patrols, making sure that kids are getting to school safely, all over the city. 15,000 people showing up, and not a single business or window broken, at least as far as I've heard. There's Pastor Ingrid getting arrested. Pastor Andrea. Social media messages that are telling the truth about what is happening here, including clergy making messages about loving neighbors. Clergy people getting arrested for being in a street. We didn't get arrested at Whipple on yesterday morning, but we went there to say, if you're coming for those 22 people who are witnesses, then come for all of us. There are also people sitting outside that Whipple building all day and all night long because they release people all day and all night long without coats and without phones. So there is someone there who will receive them and help them get to a safe place and get a coat. Everybody coming up with fun new names and the using of the apps that we have these days, although that makes it a little confusing. Sit-ins at businesses who are making space for ICE and allowing for their employees and customers to be taken. SOS out in luminaries and people on the lakes. This one's at Benemacaska. I know Debbie and I were there. Here's ICE out on Nokomis. Candles on every corner when they tell us to go home because they don't want violence to erupt, and really we don't either. So they tell us, let's do it all over the city, and all over the city there are people on corners with candles. Clever protest signs. Neighbors warning neighbors that ICE is around and blowing whistles and recording. As the saying goes, from Renee Good's wife, we had whistles and phones, they had guns. Blow up frogs and foxes at protests. I don't know about the fox. I did see the fox, but these frogs are clever because it's saying that the plagues are coming. That's what Exodus is. So this is like the however many plagues into getting Pharaoh to let my people go. It's very clever. So that's that using humor piece. Yeah, I missed one, I feel like. Maybe it's in the wrong order. Yes, the bicycle, more than 500 people bicycling in a memorial for Renee Good and Alex Preddy. This is my favorite thing that's happened, the National Guard practicing nonviolence by showing up and standing in between ICE and protesters at Whipple and handing out pizza and coffee and donuts to the protesters, or witnesses, let's call it witnesses, all over the place. Everybody's getting together and being neighborly, and they're calling everything that happens a protest. It's not all a protest. Some of it's, and then the mutual aid that's happening all over the place, so much of it that's happening that people are getting turned away from trying to offer that help. There's a very large copy of the Constitution that people had out yesterday, I guess, Friday. This band that's been playing since 2020, Brass Solidarity, that plays a lot at George Floyd Squared, but shows up at all the protests and makes great music. And then if there's a counter-protester, they sort of surround them and drown them out, which is really great nonviolent resistance. And then the singing resistance that's happening with hundreds of people and sometimes thousands going out in the streets and singing songs to comfort people who are inside. Or the one today that's happening, it starts at 2 o'clock, will be to encourage people to leave their jobs. So it meets at Westminster Pres, the big one downtown, and it's at 2 o'clock, and they will go to hotels where they know that federal agents are staying and sing outside of them to say, you can leave anytime and join us. So that's what is happening today. It will happen in other places too. But like, that's a great, like, who expects, they expect people to start agitating, and then you meet hundreds of singers carrying stars around. That's the thing that they don't expect, and doing the thing that they don't expect is what is the, oh yeah, and there's the dog picture you didn't get to see with the booties, yeah. I wrote this last night, finished at 8 o'clock, and I swear to you, I thought of 5 other examples after that. All of the art that's happening in the homes and in the communities. There's poetry coming through my feeds all of the time. So there is just all kinds of great nonviolent resistance that is happening. Economic boycotts as well of some of the places that are helping to make this happen, or, yeah. And just going out and not being afraid, because to be, what is it that they tell us? You have to act free to be free, or else they've already won. Just taking care of neighbors so that they can stay, and making sure that rent gets paid. This is not over, and it's going to be hard. And seriously, as soon as things turn violent, that's the end of it for us. As soon as it turns violent for Minnesotans, it's already violent. We know that. It's very violent. That's why we're in this place. We've already lost when that happens, when we try to fight violence with violence. That would be the start of the Civil War, and we certainly don't want to have that, because we lose. So if we can keep it up, we win. And we will go down in history. Dogs. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, seeing all the bikers. Yeah. Yep, it's just everyone. It's not everyone. We all know it's not everyone, but there are a lot. There are many, many, many of us. And it will go down in history and be taught to the future generations who will learn about nonviolent resistance. As the poem at the beginning said, commit to the revolution and I promise we will win. Not, of course, that everything will be fine. It never is. Revolution isn't the same as victory. Revolution is the turning of a wheel whose essence is change. This is the season of epiphany. It is a season of light, of learning, of seeing things for the first time. May we see and be what we can be. So to close, I'm going to teach you, or I'm going to try to teach you one of these songs that the Singing Resistance has been learning. And join me as soon as you can, and I'll try to get through well enough. Stop crying, everyone. You make it hard for me. Okay. Dogs in boots. It goes like this. Hold on, hold on, my dear ones, here comes the dawn. Hold on, hold on, my dear ones, here comes the dawn. Hold on, hold on, my dear ones, here comes the dawn. Hold